Today we cancel National Geographic. I mean, really, we could cancel National Geographic simply for rebranding itself as Nat Geo a few years ago and shifting all of its television programming over into reality shows. The National Geographic channel should be nothing but nature documentaries and documentaries about primitive tribes people in the Amazon. That's all anyone ever wanted from National Geographic. They don't want whatever Nat Geo gives us now, and what they give us now includes a heavy dose of far-left racial propaganda, of course. The most recent and egregious example of this is something called the Race Card Project, which the company recently unveiled. To give you an idea of the tone and tenor of this thing, the editor of National Geographic, Susan Goldberg, recently sent out a mass email to readers promoting the project, and she signed the email, quote, "Sincerely, Susan Goldberg, Editor-in-Chief, National Geographic, Race Card, white, privileged, with much to learn." So here she is literally playing the race card, but for a white person, playing the race card means apologizing. Non-white people can play the race card in order to gain sympathy and privilege. White people can play it in order to be further demeaned and degraded. And as we've discovered, many white people in this country have a masochistic fetish for that sort of thing. So they're more than happy to play the card and accept that treatment. As for the Race Card Project itself, Nat Geo rolled it out on Twitter. And here's what it says. It says, 10 years ago, Michelle Norris launched the Race Card Project, which asks people to describe their feelings on race in just 6 words. She thought few would respond. Here are some of the responses out of 500,000 so far that she's received. And from there, Nat Geo highlights several people of different races who describe their lived experience, to use the leftist term, in 6 words. We'll go through some of these that they highlight. First, we have a black man, Asias Meritab, who says, "Black boy, white world, perpetually exhausted." And we're told that his parents came here from Ethiopia, and you'd think that he'd be quite grateful to be in this country, living a life of comparative luxury and privilege, and not in Ethiopia, but no, he's exhausted. So exhausted. It's exhausting living in a first world country, well-fed, with access to all of life's comforts and luxuries. It's so exhausting. Just exhausted all the time. Then we have Mark Quarles, who's a black man who chooses these 6 words. With kids, I'm dad. Alone, thug. Also, there's Hannah Peoples, who says, I am not an exotic creature. Hannah is not white, but we aren't told what her ethnic identity is. Apparently, the fact that people can't look at her and immediately know her country of origin is its own form of persecution. We're told, quote, Hannah Peoples said that constant guessing game about her identity, as well as the harassment and unwanted attention she's received from creepy men, make her feel like a specimen. Her 6-word story was born of exasperation. Exhausted, exasperated. Then we have Jean Tagaban, who's a Native American, who says, Native Americans, America's invisible, invisible, invisible. This one struck me as a little bit lazy. I mean, he's given 6 words and he can only think of 3, so he repeats 1 3 times. So it's kind of like Native Americans, America's invisible. No, actually, you get 6 words. Oh, okay, well, then America's invisible, invisible, invisible. There are a few white people featured, but compare their self-description with the descriptions offered by the minority participants. White guy Daniel Robbins says, ashamed that accomplished minorities surprise me. He's given 6 words to describe his experience as a white man, and one of the 6 he chooses is ashamed. Same for Lindsay Heydrich, who's a white woman who says, I'm ashamed for my ancestors' race. Apparently she had ancestors who were slave owners. She's ashamed not of their behavior, but of their race and her own. The only commonality between all of these responses is that everyone is dejected and sad and complaining. They're all living in the most prosperous and freest country in world history. They're all unimaginably privileged when compared to almost everyone else who has ever lived anywhere on earth. They're all clothed and fed and doing fine, and yet their perception of their experience is completely negative. For the minority respondents, they're angry about the alleged persecution they suffer at the hands of whites, although none of them can give a compelling example of persecution. One of them is annoyed because people can't guess her ethnicity on sight. And the other guy's exhausted because although life is a hell of a lot better than it would be in Ethiopia, it still isn't perfect. And the lack of a perfect life is exhausting. Meanwhile, the white people are ashamed. Ashamed of themselves, even though they can't really explain what they've done wrong. So just think about this. The minorities are sure that white people are doing them wrong, but can't explain how. The white people are sure that they've done wrong, but can't explain what they've done wrong. Everyone is sad. Everyone is mad. Only the white people are ashamed. And nobody knows why they feel any of this. It's all quite sick and gross and perverse. And it shows you to what extent many in the American public have been brainwashed. This is one of the most telling signs of brainwashing. When people hold firm, often self-destructive beliefs, but they can't explain why they hold those beliefs. It also shows us that our culture is suffering from, I think, a cataclysmic crisis of meaning. While our comfort has increased and our collective wealth and luxury has also increased, we've turned from God and we've turned from traditional faith, and we have found our lives empty and purposeless because of it. I mean, that's the real reason why people are so sad and depressed and riddled with anxiety that they can't explain. But the left's racial dogma gives people a framework for understanding that anxiety. It's the wrong framework, but a person without meaning, a person without purpose will grasp on to anything that seems solid and intelligible, even if only superficially intelligible. Because this is all the result of brainwashing, it's probably useless to engage with it intellectually, but I will anyway, just on this one point. The idea that white people should be ashamed of their whole race because of the past bad behaviors of some white people is completely insane. Even if white people were uniquely evil in history, it still wouldn't make sense to be ashamed or apologetic for your race. You don't inherit guilt and sin through skin pigment. Your great-great-great-grandfather's sins are not your own, even if his skin color is. But as it happens, and this is very crucial to understand, white people were most definitely not uniquely evil in history. What, after all, are the evils that white people are supposed to be so ashamed about? Slavery? Conquest? Genocide? Racism? Well, first of all, conquest isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's a good thing for one civilization to be conquered by another. I gave the example last week of the Aztecs, who themselves conquered and enslaved their tributary states and forced them to provide fodder, often women and children, for human sacrifice. There's a reason why when the Spanish came here, they were able to easily enlist neighboring tribes to defeat the Aztecs. Think about that. You've got these strange creatures who have landed from an unknown land, and the other Native American tribes, many of them quickly fell in with the Spanish and said, yeah, we want to help you take these people down. Everyone hated the Aztecs because they were a brutal, murderous, dictatorial regime. But the point is that however you feel about conquest, whites did not invent it. We didn't even introduce it to this side of the world. White people didn't introduce slavery or racism either. These are humanity's sins. They've been practiced or committed by all people everywhere through all history. The unique thing about the United States' relationship with slavery is that we abolished it in less than a century, whereas some parts of the world, many of them non-white, took millennia to do the same. Some people still have not effectively gotten rid of the practice. As for racism, racism, again, is a foible of humanity, all humanity, across time. And it is today far more prominent and far more accepted and far more mainstream in non-Western countries. If white people should be ashamed, then everyone, everywhere, should be ashamed all the time. Either that, or we can all move on with our lives, and we can deal with the present, and we can let the past remain where it belongs. Whatever choice we make, as far as that goes, the one choice that I certainly can make today, at least, is to say to National Geographic, you're canceled. Listen, hit that subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.